Just how good of a military science fiction story can be written by somebody who has never served in uniform? Turns out some of the best classic military science fiction books out there are written by non-veterans. Please join the conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to D3 Reads. It's Eric. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And today we are again talking military science fiction. It's one of my favorite topics. I've said that so many times, but today I want to finish a conversation that we started a few weeks ago. We took a look at some of the best military science fiction classics out there, but we looked at it through the lens of those written by military veterans. And probably to no surprise, some of the best, most gritty military science fiction books out there have been written by military veterans. You've got the Lost Fleet series, Dorsai, the Forever War, Hammer Slammers. So some of the best, most enduring classics have all been written by veterans. But now we're going to look on the other side of this conversation and look to see what kind of books have been written by non-veterans. And it turns out some of the most enduring military sci-fi classics have been written by those that never served in uniform. I don't think it should be a surprise, especially in today's Western culture where we have this idea of civilian leadership of military forces. We've come to recognize that war is not solely a military endeavor. War affects populations. It's driven by leadership, and so folks outside of the uniform have a perspective on war that is legitimate and can carry quite an interesting narrative. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to look at 5 classics of some of the most popular military science fiction books that have been written by non-veterans. Now, I want to confess, 2 of the books that we're going to talk about, I haven't finished. One of them, simply because I got distracted and I haven't gone back to it, but one of them was actually a DNF. I did not finish it on purpose, and I don't know if I'm going to go back to it unless I can get some folks to assure me that the problem that I had with this book gets better. Number 5 on the list is On Basilisk Station, and is also one of those 5 books I have not completed reading yet. I actually started this last year. I had every intention of finishing it, but I got pulled into some other projects, and I just never got back to it before I had to turn it back into the library. And so I just never got back to it, but I intend to. This book is extremely popular. The whole series, the whole Honorverse series is very popular. We got over 20 books in this series, so it's got to have something to it, right? The bit I did get to read was pretty interesting. It starts off, with a military political kind of seeding of conflicts to come, and then Honor Harrington being assigned to her new command of an outdated kind of battleship. That's basically as far as I'd gotten. I'll admit that I didn't find it as compelling as I had hoped, but it certainly wasn't bad. But On Basilisk Station, written by David Weber. David Weber was a game designer, I believe, for a war game, video game. And he started writing some books that were related to the in-world game that he was a part of. And then he eventually started writing the Honor Harrington series as well as some other books. And he's extraordinarily popular right now. So this is one of the books that I can't vouch for yet, but based off of just the vast popularity of the series and just the fact that David Weber, if you go to the science fiction section of the book, he's kind of everywhere, at least at the bookstores that I've been going to. This is probably a book that is a safe bet if you're looking to get into military science fiction. I do plan on looking at some new military science fiction before the end of the year, and I'm going to try to roll On Basilisk Station into that mix so that I can speak with a little bit more authority about it. But definitely one of the more popular military sci-fi books written by non-veterans. Now, number 4 is Shards of Honor, which was published in 1986 by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is my DNF, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. This book is part of the Vorkosigan saga, and if you take a look at the Goodreads list of best military science fiction, the second book in the series actually rates higher than this first book, Shards of Honor. And but I have to read in order. Actually, I think this one is much further down than the second book, whose title escapes me at the moment. But I want to start the series at the beginning, so I picked up Shards of Honor, and I read probably the first 15-20%, and then I had to put it down. And the reason is the setup is interesting. And I was actually drawn in by Bujold's description of this new world. But it starts off with a military officer, Cordelia Naismith. She's the captain of this Baden Astronomical Survey ship, and her and her crew are on the surface of this planet, exploring it and trying to detail flora and fauna and that kind of thing. And I really found actually that the description of the world and some of the creatures that lived on it was actually kind of interesting. But her crew gets attacked, and she winds up getting knocked unconscious, I think, for a brief bit. And when she comes to, she finds herself prisoner of this notorious guy by the name of Captain Errol Vorkosigan, and he's called the Butcher for the Butcher of Kamar for his apparent deeds at some previous battle. Now, the main character here, Cordelia, she is, as far as she knows, her team has been slaughtered by Vorkosigan's soldiers at his orders, and he's taken them prisoner now, and he plans on taking them with him as he goes to an unidentified or another site that he doesn't explain right away. But it turns out that Vorkosigan may have been betrayed by somebody, and he's not quite as the baddie that Naismith thought that he was. But the problem I had with it, and I just couldn't get past it, was that she is in a situation where she's lost parts of her crew. They were killed by this attack, and she has no reason to trust this guy. But the journey to this area, which turns out to be like a weapons cache area, where he hopes to be able to make contact with his ship that he thinks he can get hold of crew that are still loyal to him. Turns out he was betrayed. She starts falling in love with the guy, and it's apparent that she starts developing kind of feelings for him over a 3-day period. And I wasn't convinced. I mean, even if she somehow decided that this guy was an honorable person, and he does some things that shows that he does have some kind of honor, the fact that she lost folks, but she's already thinking that this guy who may or may not be responsible for it is kind of good looking, and she, maybe she starts developing a sympathetic ear to him over this 3-day period. I just wasn't buying it, and just by kind of reading summaries of the book, I know that they kind of get together later on, and I wasn't going for it. It sounded too much like romance was infecting too early. I'm not against any all romance in books, but you can't just shove it in the first part of this. I felt it was an insult to her as a military leader that this female leader was already kind of swooning, even though that there had been loss of life and a gravely injured other lieutenant that served her, that was underneath her, that was still alive. So I put it aside. Maybe it's the military veteran in me couldn't get past that. But I've had folks tell me that the books get better, or that that this first book actually gets better. So let me know if you think that it'd be a good investment of time to get back into it. But right now, I don't have any intention of reading Shards of Honor. But it is, the series rates highly, at least on Goodreads, as a solid military science fiction. The writing itself is fine. Bujold is definitely a kind of a skilled writer. Like I said, her description of the world that they were on, I found was pretty good. But yeah, I had to set this one aside. But again, because the series rates so high, I thought I would share this here with you. If you think that that's a little personal dynamic isn't a deal breaker for you, you might want to check out Shards of Honor. Next is an interesting one, Ender's Game, published in 1985 and written by Orson Scott Card. Actually, the book was written or published in 1985. The Ender's Game story started out as a short story that was published in the 70s in a magazine, and then Orson Scott Card wound up developing out into a full-length book that got published in 1985. And since then, it's been adapted for film. And the book is wildly popular as military science fiction. And I can't go into too many details about the story before fear of kind of revealing the kind of the twist ending if you haven't seen the movie or watched the book. So I'm going to be careful how I describe this. But this book was actually on the Marine Corps recommended reading list at one point. You know, each of the services have recommended reading, and most of the time it's, you know, nonfiction, theory and tactics, and sometimes philosophy and that kind of thing. But this was a nonfiction, or obviously was a fictional sci-fi book that I think, and I assume, because I don't know what the thought behind it was, that it dealt with tactics, because a lot of this book, so the story is here that humanity is at war, Earth is at war with a spacefaring race, and these attacks come in waves every so many decades. I actually can't recall how long of a time, but basically Earth's been at war, and they're expecting another engagement within a certain number of years. And so they start recruiting gifted children to train them to be military leaders to be able to fight this alien race. And so Ender Wiggins ends up getting pulled into this, and turns out that he's got quite a gift. And the bulk of the story takes place in this training facility, and this training facility is actually pretty cool. And I think the movie does a good job of capturing it. It's this massive kind of globe with no gravity, and you basically, you and your squad have to go at each other. Opposing squads and teams come at each other from various portions of this globe, and they float around, and they have to figure out how to use physics and obstacles and strategy and tactics to be able to, you know, win these war games. And this teaches them various things about how to think in combat and that sort of thing. And that's a huge part of this book. Orson Scott Card, something of a controversial person. You know, he was a conservative Mormon, and some of his, I think, his religious beliefs get bled into behind the story. I didn't find it too particularly distracting in this book, but I know some folks do. But Ender's Game was a very entertaining book. I thought it was solid sci-fi. I thought some of the morality questions it was asking by the end of the book, and then with its kind of its twist, I thought it was I think very heartfelt, and resonated with me anyway. So Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, definitely a classic military science fiction written by non-veterans. Number 2 on the list is Old Man's War, written by John Scalzi and published in 2005. Now, Old Man's War has, I think, 6 books now in it, and a 7th is coming out later on this year. John Scalzi never served in the military. He's been, I can't remember what his earlier kind of career was, but he's basically been a writer his entire life. And he happened to pen in 2005 a classic of military science fiction. I love the story setup, the premise here. You've got the Earth, and you've got the colonial galaxy out there. So humanity has started to spread out into the stars. But the thing is if you're on the Earth, you can't leave the Earth unless you want to join the military, the colonial defense forces, and get out into and fight out in the universe, because the universe is a dangerous place. Lots of creatures vying for power. And but the thing is, the way you get in the colonial defense forces is you volunteer once you turn 75 to join. And what happens is the 75-year-old folks who join will get sent up into space, and they will be given new bodies to fight with. Now, odds are you're going to die, and the logic goes: you're 75 years old on Earth, you're going to die. Why not have a chance for a better life? Because if you can survive, I think, 10 years, then you can be retired, and then you'll get a patch of you get a patch of land somewhere out in the universe, but no one ever gets to come back. So once you're out there, you're out there. And you have to do some pretty nasty fighting in order to earn your retirement later on. And so this Old Man's War starts, or the protagonist of this is John Perry, who he lost his wife. She had passed away, and he decided he was going to join the colonial defense forces. And so he does. He gets his new body, and he subsequently has these various adventures. Pretty intense. I think the fighting is pretty cool. I did have a little bit of a problem, and I see this as kind of like a common thread through a lot of Scalzi's books, but his character, I think, it just picks up on things a little too quickly. I did like the military sci-fi aspect of it. The fighting was cool. Some of the enemies that they fought were very creative, kind of eerie in some cases, and some of it was just outright just good old-fashioned fighting. The book's entertaining. John Scalzi, again, he never served in the military, but he does a really good job of capturing. I think he does a really good job of capturing, in some aspects, some of the camaraderie between those who serve together. So there's some twists in here, and I think it's definitely worth your time as a military science fiction book if you're getting into this. Actually, it's funny. For years, I hadn't read this, and my wife actually picked it up a few years ago, and she's like, "You got to check this out." And that's how I got into it. She's a veteran as well, and so yeah, definitely, I think worth your time, and one of the best, most classic military science fiction books written and it's written by non-veteran. And finally, number one is Armor by John Stakely, which was published in 1984. This book was my all-time, it remains one of my absolute favorite military science fiction books. It was my number one pick, but then after I read Hammer Slammers, it kind of got pushed to the side just a bit. But still, this book is intense, and it's just so well written. I really enjoy Felix, who's the main character in this. You start with him as he's an enlistee who gets assigned to be a scout and sent out to this alien planet called Banshee, where there's this never-ending war called the Ant War. And the monster and the enemy that they're facing are these sentient ants on this planet Banshee, which is poisonous. It really has it seems to have, as far as the soldiers are concerned, no value whatsoever, but their job is to fight, not to question. And so Felix gets sent out on missions that has this just astronomical death rate. The odds of him surviving, I forget how many jumps, is just so minimal. And he just doesn't die. He keeps living, and he keeps getting sent back because he lives. And so you just had this cycle of violence. The combat is fantastic. The environment is I think really gritty, and just I really enjoyed this book. Now, the story is told in two different in two different ways. You have the fighting going on Banshee, and then you have this kind of seemingly unrelated story that it switches over to periodically, and then switches back to the fighting on Banshee. But I think Stakely does this wonderful job of kind of pulling it all together at the end, and it was just really an intense read and a lot of fun. Again, Stakely never served. I can't remember what his vocation was. I want to say he was maybe a professor or a teacher, but he died somewhat young. But what I found interesting is that he worked a lot just kind of advocating for veterans. He set up some kind of, I want to say he founded or had a big hand in a charity. I want to say it was in Texas, kind of supporting Gulf War veterans and that kind of thing. And so he never served, but he had this sense of duties for to help and to support military veterans. And so I don't know what the connection of that. I tried digging, trying to see like what his connection was, if it was just a sense of service on his own part or what. But Stakely's sincerity and his kind of, I don't know, his empathy for the soldier kind of, I think, shows up in Armor. And so it's a really good read. I highly recommend it. One of my favorites. And so that's it. Those are 5 of the best and most popular military science fiction books out there written by non-veterans. I would love to know what you think about any of these books, or if you have other suggestions by authors who are non-veterans as well. And maybe in about a year or so, I'll try to pull these together again and see if we can add anything to the mix. So thank you all so much for your time. If you haven't subscribed to us, I ask you to please do so. Thank you so much for everyone who has liked, subscribed, shared. It means a lot to us. I love the conversations, so please drop comments. and let us know what you think about these books or whatever else you're reading that's military science fiction. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day and keep reading.